Kristi Noem loves to scream law and order until the law applies to her, of course. Because we've now got confirmation that Noem literally ignored a federal judge's order on deportation. So let's get into it. So a group of over 100 Venezuelan men are in U.S. custody, designated under this Alien Enemies Act, right? Yes, that's the same authoritarian fever dream from the John Adams era that keeps getting resurrected whenever Trump wants to treat people as less than human. Now, their lawyers, they go to federal court, and U.S. District Judge James Boasberg looks at what's happening and says, no, you're not going to disappear people, okay? You're not going to disappear these men. They're going to stay in U.S. custody while we sort this out legally. He gave an oral order and then followed up in writing. The judge is very, very clear. Do not deport these men. Do not move them out of U.S. control or jurisdiction. But what does Kristi Noem do? Well, they put these men on planes anyway. Now they're gone. Gone. This is not confusion. This is not oops. This is complete defiance of the court. That's it. Now, if that's all that happened, by the way, it would already have been completely outrageous. I mean, ignoring a federal court order is supposed to be the kind of thing that gets you in trouble, ends careers, possibly. But no, it gets worse. See, these flights didn't just go to some neutral third country facility. No, they went to El Salvador. And not just El Salvador, which is already bad enough, right? No, they end up getting shipped into Bukele's giant dystopian mega prison, CCOT. You know, that's the one that's been paraded around in glossy drone shots where thousands of men were crammed in, shackled, tattooed, half naked. The prison human rights groups that have slammed for doing torture, beatings, and mass abuse. Yeah, that's the one. So Kristi Noem's crew takes people a federal judge explicitly said should not be sent from this country. They must remain in U.S. custody and hand them over to a foreign government's horror prison. That is messed up. But it gets worse. Okay, now you'd think surely the Trump Justice Department is going to have a problem with their people openly ignoring federal judges, right? No, of course not. No, according to the reports, Trump's DOJ comes in with a new galaxy brain legal excuse, which boils down simply to, well, you know that oral order not to deport them? Well, it turns out once the planes actually leave U.S. airspace, that we made sure of happening, that order kind of stopped applying. Oops, sorry. Yes, sure, we followed them kind of when they were physically here, but you know, now that the planes are in the air, I can't do anything. Sorry. That's their defense. Under Trump, the theory of law becomes court orders are like Wi-Fi. Once you leave the coverage zone, that's it. We don't have to follow it anymore. So if a judge says, do not deport these men, Trump people just hear, do not deport them while I can physically see them. Right. So, look, this is what an authoritarian administration looks like. They don't say, we reject the courts. They say, oh, sure, yeah, we respect the courts and all. And then figure out a way to creatively ignore them the second it serves their agenda. Judge Boasberg, to his credit, not taking this line down. He is actually talking about potential criminal contempt. Because again, this is not vague. He told them in plain English, you are not to deport these men. This is an oral order. This is a written order. Same thing. Same meaning. But Trump's people, they heard that and go, okay, but what if we just rushed them onto the planes then? We ship them out to this foreign hellhole and then we can come back and argue technicalities with the court. See, this is what sits at the heart of Trumpism. You don't work with the system. You bulldoze it. You smash right through it. And then you dare someone to hold you accountable. Oh, yeah, let's do the thing first, then lawyer to death later. Hope the judge blinks. Hope maybe all those threats from unhinged MAGA chud supporters, make the judge relent. I mean, under Trump, this is not the bug. That's the feature. It is what they do. These are the same people that also want you to believe that a broken window at CVS is like the end of Western civilization or something. Or the same people that look at protesters blocking traffic and start fantasizing about running them over. I mean, they're calling shoplifting a crime wave that justifies turning our cities into militarized zones. When in reality, the biggest theft in this country, type of theft, is wage theft, is employers stealing our paychecks. But when it comes to, actually obeying a federal court order, when a judge says, you shall not deport these men under my jurisdiction while I sort out their legal status, Noem's crew says, no, we're going to treat this like a polite suggestion. See, this is what law and order means to these people. Law and order for the powerless, impunity for the powerful. And of course, they always, beat their chests about following the Constitution, right? While operating on the assumption that they're never going to be the ones who actually face justice. Okay? And let's talk for a second about who's at the center of all of this. Venezuelan men. Now, whether or not you agree, of their migration story, or whether or not, they should be here legally or whatever, or what pathway that is, right? Remember, they were in U.S. custody. They were under our control. They were entitled to have their due process. A federal judge says, stay put. Keep them here while that process plays out. And instead, Trump and Noem, well, they instead shoved them onto planes and dumped them into Bukele's mega prison, a place built as a brutal PR stunt to show how tough on crime this man is, a place that has been documented for torture and abuse. And these people end up sitting there for months. Then eventually there's some deal, some arrangement, and they're sent back to Venezuela, which isn't really all that great either. Look, at no point in this entire process did any of Trump's people say, hey, maybe violating a federal court order to disappear people into a foreign torture prison is not a great look for the law and order crowd. But then again, these people love that. They love doing this to people because the cruelty is the point. And look, this is where I want to zoom out. I want you to zoom out and see this overall pattern here. This is not Kristi Noem just being Kristi Noem. Okay, this is how Trump world thinks that power is supposed to work. They see migrants as outside of having rights. Okay, so think about like a Venn diagram or some circles, right? And you've got migrants that are sitting outside of that, and the circle represents who is actually, who gets these rights, okay? Who's allowed to have due process, and they see migrants as right outside of that, which is not true. Everyone is supposed to have these due process rights. That is in the Constitution, the thing that they say that they're supposed to follow, but they don't. They don't. So now when a judge steps in and says, actually, these men do have due process and they are under our protection, Trump's people don't hear that. They hear, oh, yeah? Well, let's see if I can get away, with ignoring you. And because it's Trump, the expectation is if, you're breaking the rules in the direction of doing more cruelty, more deterrence, then you're going to be rewarded and not punished. So now, Trump and Noem love to talk about how they're just defending our institutions when it comes to jailing protesters or, banning things that they don't like. But let's look about what actually institutional respect means in practice to them. Federal judge orders, optional. International human rights norms, optional. Basic due process, optional. The only thing that isn't optional for them is loyalty to the leader and cruelty towards the designated outgroups. That is the core of fascist politics. The law isn't a neutral set of rules for them. It is a weapon, and it's applied selectively, harshly downward, and gently or not at all upwards. So when Kristi Noem ignores the judge and ships people off to Bukele's mega prison, that is not a glitch. That is exactly how this is supposed to function. So next time you hear her or Trump talk about how they're for law and order, remember this. Under their watch, a federal judge says, do not do this thing. And they do it anyway. They put these men on planes in direct defiance of a court order and delivered them into a foreign torture prison. And then their lawyers tried to spin a story about how once the planes took off, the law doesn't apply anymore. No. Look, if the rule of law does not protect the most vulnerable in the system, then it's not rule of law. It is theater. It is a costume that the powerful wear while they decide who is a person and who is simply a problem to be disappeared. If this video helped you cut through the BS and see what is really happening, then smash that like button. Every single like pushes back against the right-wing propaganda machine. I can't do this work without your support. So please check out my Patreon. Link is in the description of this video. For a few bucks a month, you can help keep this channel independent from corporate BS. So hit subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's keep fighting for democracy and against fascism together.